Whose house did you say this was? The voice came from somewhere behind the laughter, smooth, lazy, and cruel in that effortless way only confidence can be. I stopped in the doorway. The chatter stumbled, then died. A dozen strangers turned their heads toward me, caught mid-celebration, drinks half-raised. My home, my quiet, sea-facing home, was alive with a party I hadn't been invited to. And there he was, leaning against the kitchen counter, wearing the kind of smile that knows exactly how much damage it causes. The man who used to leave his coffee cup beside mine every morning now stood beside someone else, a woman whose perfume felt foreign in the air that once smelled like salt and sandalwood. No one spoke. The sound of the ocean filled the silence, steady and indifferent. I set my bag down carefully, the soft thud of it landing like a punctuation mark. "You're in my home," I said. Calm. Too calm. A few people exchanged looks, as if they'd misheard me. He didn't. His eyes found mine, those same blue-gray eyes I once believed held safety, and for a split second, I saw it, guilt, sharp and real. Then it was gone. "Not anymore," he said, his tone turning casual. "You weren't supposed to be back yet." My pulse stayed steady. And yet, here I am. Someone laughed. Nervous. Someone else cleared their throat. The woman beside him shifted, trying to look busy on her phone. The smell of spilled champagne and expensive deceit hung heavy between us. "Don't make this dramatic," he said, stepping forward. "We're just—" "You're trespassing," I interrupted. Quietly, precisely. That word landed differently. Even the ocean seemed to pause. I moved further inside, tracing the small violations with my eyes, my grandmother's vase used for roses, his jacket thrown over the armchair I'd chosen for reading, a half-eaten meal on the table where I'd once written him notes before work. Every corner whispered the same word, replaced. He gave a little scoff, like this was beneath him. "You always did have a flair for overreaction." I looked at him for a long moment. "And you always mistook kindness for weakness." The air in the room changed. His jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Behind him, the woman's hands trembled slightly as she set her glass down. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She didn't have to. I already knew. I stepped closer, just enough that he could smell the calm on me, that terrifying, measured kind of calm that doesn't raise its voice. "You should leave," I said softly. "All of you." No one moved. That wasn't a suggestion. He hesitated, just for a heartbeat, and in that hesitation, I saw the truth: he wasn't in control anymore. Not really. They thought I'd break. They thought I'd beg. But what came next would prove them wrong. They still had no idea who they were really dealing with. Would you like me to continue with part 2 in the same cinematic tone, keeping the mystery unfolding slowly while deepening the tension and emotional stakes? He didn't move. Not at first. Pride has a way of making even simple actions, like leaving, feel like surrender. The others waited for his cue. People like that always do. They orbit power, even when it's rotting. "Come on," I said quietly. "You've taken enough." His jaw flexed. "You're making a scene." "No," I said, almost gently. "You made the scene. I'm just ending it." Something in my tone must have unnerved him because his voice dropped. "You can't just." "Can't?" I stepped closer. "You're standing in my house, drinking from my glasses, pretending I don't exist. I can do whatever truth allows." For a long second, no one breathed. Then, one by one, they began to shift. The laughter had turned brittle, the arrogance had lost its shine. People gathered their things, murmuring excuses. "We didn't know," he said, "it was fine, we thought you were away." Cowards, all of them. But necessary ones. I watched each of them leave, memorizing faces, names, details. You never know which thread will be useful later. When the last door shut, only the two of us remained. Him, standing in the ruin of his own confidence, and me, standing in the quiet I'd just reclaimed. He tried to fill the silence. "You always wanted control, didn't you?" "No," I said. "I wanted respect. You just couldn't tell the difference." His laugh was low and mean. "You think this changes anything?" I let my gaze fall to the table, the empty bottle, the half-finished meal, the way his phone still lit up every few seconds with messages from her. "It changes everything," I said. "Because now, I've stopped pretending not to see." He didn't understand yet, and that was fine. Clarity is a slow poison, it works best when swallowed over time. I walked to the window, opened it, and let the sea wind in. It swept through the room, clearing the air of perfume and pretense. He turned away from the light like it burned. "You'll regret this," he said finally. "Maybe," I said. "But not as much as you will." I picked up my bag and left him standing there, still talking to the echo of his own arrogance. Outside, the air was colder than before, the sky edged in silver. My reflection followed me in every dark window, calm, steady, unbroken. I wasn't running from the past anymore. I was walking toward the reckoning it deserved. Because endings are never loud. They start quietly, with someone deciding not to look away anymore. And by the time he realized what had begun, it would already be too late. The storm came in before midnight. Wind pressed against the windows like it wanted to get in, like it already knew what I was planning. I sat at the dining table, the same one they'd turned into a bar hours earlier. The surface was still damp from melted ice. I let my fingers rest on the wood and felt the faint pulse of the sea underneath, steady and unhurried. I matched my breathing to it. When you've been betrayed long enough, silence becomes a weapon. It sharpens your mind, helps you see the architecture of people, where they're strong, where they'll crack. I opened my laptop and waited for it to hum awake. The screen's glow painted the room in pale light, catching on the framed photographs, pieces of a life I'd once curated with care. His face was in some of them. Not for much longer. I started with the ledger. Not money, not exactly, records. Dates, names, transactions, messages. The kind of digital dust people think disappears after deletion. It doesn't. It just hides in the corners of the cloud, waiting for someone who knows where to look. I knew. Because long before the betrayal was public, I'd seen its shadow in the details, a card charge that didn't fit, a lie rehearsed too smoothly. I didn't confront it then. I collected it. Every proof, every pattern. Not revenge, not yet. Just truth, preserved quietly, patiently. Now, as the wind battered the glass, the truth unfolded line by line. Hidden accounts. A company name I didn't recognize. Property documents with my forged signature. I stared at them until the rage dulled into clarity. He hadn't just betrayed me. He'd built his future on my silence. A message flashed on my phone, his name, still saved there, though not for long. "Don't do anything stupid. Let's talk." I smiled faintly. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Talk. That's what they always say when they realize you're not the fool they counted on. I typed a reply. Short. Polite. Dangerous only in what it didn't say. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. My office. We'll settle everything. He wouldn't see it for what it was. Not yet. He'd walk in thinking it was negotiation. He'd leave realizing it was an ending. I closed the laptop and leaned back. The house was quiet again, stripped of its noise, its ghosts, its pretense. Outside, the sea kept crashing, relentless and certain. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. And when the morning came, so would the reckoning. They thought they'd won, but the game had only just begun. Morning arrived gray and deliberate, the kind of light that makes everything look honest. The sea was calmer now, pretending innocence. I knew better. Calm is just chaos rehearsing its next move. I brewed coffee the way I used to, 2 sugars, a pause long enough to remember who I was before everything turned. The routine steadied me. It reminded me that control isn't about dominance. It's about awareness. By 8:30, the table was cleared. The evidence arranged. Laptop open. Files ready. No lawyers, no witnesses, not yet. Some truths are best delivered in private, before they're released to the world. Like the stillness before a storm decides to break. I checked the clock. 8:47, he'd come early. He always did, back when he still believed being first meant being in charge. Right on cue, the gate buzzer rang. His car idled outside, sleek and expensive, paid for with money he hadn't earned. I watched him through the window before unlocking the door. His confidence was almost admirable, the way he carried it like armor, even as it started to rust. He smiled when I opened the door. The same practiced smile that used to undo me. Now, it only confirmed how little he'd changed. "You look good," he said, stepping inside like he'd never been asked not to. "I am good," I replied, closing the door behind him. "Sit." He hesitated, thrown by the tone, not anger, not softness. Just authority. The kind that comes from knowing something the other person doesn't. He sat. Of course he did. "I looked through the accounts," I said, sliding the laptop toward him. "You've been busy." He leaned back, trying for casual. "You went through my stuff?" "Our stuff," I corrected. "Except the parts you thought I'd never find." His eyes flicked to the screen, then to me. "You don't understand how business works." "I do now," I said evenly. "I understand how deceit works, too. They're similar, one just pays better." He started to speak, but I cut him off with a look. "You forged my name on 3 documents. You moved assets without consent. You drained accounts tied to both our names. That's not what." "I have proof." The words were quiet, but they carried weight, the kind that bends the air. He stopped talking. His throat moved as he swallowed. For a moment, the only sound was the ocean outside and the ticking of the clock between us. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I'm here to give you a choice." He frowned. "What choice?" I leaned back, eyes steady. "How public you want this to be?" The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loaded, trembling, alive. I could see realization begin to bloom behind his eyes, the slow awareness that this wasn't a confrontation. It was a controlled demolition. He opened his mouth to respond, but I smiled, calm, certain, final. "Drink your coffee," I said. "You're going to need it." Because what happened next would leave nothing standing between us but truth. Would you like part 5 to unfold the confrontation itself, where the first cracks in his confidence appear, and the protagonist begins revealing the full extent of what they know, or would you prefer a slower, psychological unraveling before the reveal? You said, write part 5 stories said. Absolutely, here's part 5, where the tension from the previous chapter tightens into a psychological confrontation. No shouting, no chaos, only silence, precision, and quiet dominance. Every word matters, every movement carries intent. The power dynamic shifts completely, though the revenge is still being revealed piece by piece. He didn't touch the coffee. He only stared at it, the steam rising like smoke from a building already burning. "I don't know what you think you found," he said, his voice low, rehearsed, still trying to sound in control. "I don't think," I replied. "I confirm." I turned the laptop toward him. The screen glowed between us, a cold, merciless kind of light. Rows of transactions. Shell companies. Transfers from joint accounts to private ones under different names. His names. He laughed once, brittle. "You're overreacting. You always." "Stop." He did. The word wasn't loud, but it landed with the weight of something immovable. "Every time you lied," I said quietly, You made it easier for me to see you clearly. That's the thing about betrayal, it reveals more about the betrayer than the betrayed. He leaned back, arms folded. What do you want? Money? Apology? I want the truth. He smiled again, but this time it faltered. The truth won't change anything. Oh, it will, I said. It already has. I tapped the keyboard, and a folder opened, recordings, screenshots, statements. His voice, captured in the background of a conversation he didn't know I'd heard. Her voice, too, the same woman who had looked away that night in my house. Their laughter, my humiliation, preserved forever in digital form. He went pale. You recorded? I remembered, I corrected. The difference is that I don't delete what matters. The mask began to crack then, not visibly, not fully, but enough to show what lived underneath: fear. Not of me, but of consequence. You wouldn't expose you? I finished for him. I already did. Quietly. To the people who needed to know first. His hand froze on the edge of the table. What did you do? Nothing loud, I said. Just sent the truth where it belonged. Your partners. The investors. The board. The lawyer who specializes in financial misconduct. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. He tried to speak, but the words tangled. I told you, I said softly, I wasn't here to argue. Just to offer you the dignity of knowing what comes next. His eyes lifted, desperate, calculating, the way people look when they realize the game they've been playing is already over. You ruined me, he whispered. I tilted my head. No. You did that yourself. I just stopped covering for it. The room went utterly still. Even the ocean seemed to hold its breath. I could feel the weight of it all pressing inward, years of deceit compressing into a single, fragile silence. He stared at me, his voice a ghost of itself. What do you want me to do? Leave. And if I don't? I looked past him, out to the horizon where the light was breaking. Then the world will know everything by noon. He finally reached for the coffee, not to drink, but to steady his shaking hand. I stood, closing the laptop, calm and deliberate. You once told me I'd never have the power to end you, I said. You were right. I leaned closer. You ended yourself. I just wrote the last line. Outside, the first gulls screamed against the wind. By the time he realized the full cost of what I'd done, the world had already started collecting its debt. By noon, the silence was gone. In its place came the sound of phones vibrating, of truth leaking through invisible wires. I watched from the balcony as the sea flattened under the noon light, pretending nothing had happened. But the air was different, sharper, charged. Somewhere out there, he was realizing that every bridge he'd built on lies was already burning. The first message came from a colleague I hadn't heard from in months. I saw the reports. Are you okay? Then another, the board called an emergency meeting. And another, he's finished. I didn't reply. Not yet. There's a strange quiet that follows justice, not relief, not joy, just a kind of stillness that feels earned. Down below, his car was gone. The tire marks still curved across the gravel like signatures of retreat. I wondered what he'd said when the calls started coming in, how long he'd tried to hold his voice steady before the facade cracked completely. I walked back inside. The house smelled like sea salt and coffee grounds, like it was finally breathing again. On the table, his untouched cup had gone cold. The steam was gone, but the stain remained, a perfect ring, faint and permanent. Some marks don't wash away. I opened the window wider. Papers fluttered, corners lifting as the wind carried them toward the light. The same documents that had once chained me now looked weightless. For the first time in months, I didn't feel watched. I felt witnessed, by the air, by the walls, by something larger than either of us. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I didn't need to answer to know who it was. He wouldn't beg, not directly. He'd use words like misunderstanding, overreaction, chance to fix this. But there are no second chances once truth leaves the room. I sat on the floor beside the open window and let the sound of the tide fill the spaces between my thoughts. He had taken years from me, not by force, but by erosion. Small cuts, constant, almost invisible. Now, each one was healing in the same way it had been made, quietly. The sun shifted, catching the edge of the photo frame on the shelf. The one that once held our picture was empty now, just a thin outline where our smiles used to be. I didn't replace it. Some absences deserved to stay visible. A soft knock echoed from the front door, hesitant, unfamiliar. Someone had arrived. But it wasn't him. And whoever it was would change everything that followed. The knock came again, 3 soft taps, careful, almost polite. Not the kind that demands entry, but the kind that carries bad news. I stood still for a moment, hand resting on the back of the chair, listening to the rhythm of it. It didn't sound like him. He always knocked like he was owed something. I opened the door. A woman stood there, wind tugging at her hair. She looked younger than I remembered, but her eyes were older, the kind of eyes that have seen the wrong side of a secret. "May I come in?" she asked. Her voice trembled once, then steadied. I stepped aside. "You already have." She entered slowly, as if afraid the house might accuse her. Her perfume, faint, expensive, carried a ghost of that night. I remembered it instantly. The woman at the counter. The one who couldn't meet my eyes. She saw the recognition and flinched. "I didn't know," she began. "They never do," I said quietly. She turned toward me, searching my face for anger. She didn't find it. There wasn't any left. What remained was something quieter, exhaustion, maybe, or peace sharpened to a point. "I came to say I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "For everything. For being part of it. For believing him." Her hands were shaking, a manila folder clutched to her chest. I noticed the faint indentation of her ring finger, a mark recently freed. "He told me you were gone," she continued. "That you'd signed everything over. That it was mutual." "Lies have a way of sounding gentle when you want to believe them," I said. "That's their trick." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I didn't realize until yesterday. When the statements came out, the names, the accounts." Her breath hitched. "He used me too." I studied her, not as a rival, but as a witness who'd survived the same fire. "So why are you here?" She placed the folder on the table. "Because there's more. Things you didn't find. Documents. Transfers under a third name. He thought I wouldn't notice, but..." She opened the folder. Pages rustled, cold and damning. I skimmed the first few lines and felt the air tighten. It wasn't over, not even close. What he'd done went deeper, wider. Offshore accounts. False signatures. Enough to drown him twice over. "Why bring this to me?" I asked. "Because," she said, meeting my eyes, "you're the only one he ever feared." For a moment, the house was silent again, the kind of silence that comes before a storm remembers it has unfinished business. I closed the folder and exhaled slowly. The sea outside had turned dark, the horizon smudged with rain. "He should have stayed gone," I murmured. She hesitated. "What will you do now?" I looked out the window, where the clouds gathered like witnesses. "Finish what he started," I said. Her voice dropped. "That sounds like revenge." "No," I said softly. "That sounds like justice catching up." The rain began to fall, tapping against the glass like a ticking clock. And somewhere out there, he was running out of time. The storm broke just after midnight. Rain hammered against the windows, wind howling through the cracks like the house itself wanted to speak. I sat at the table again, the folder open before me, papers spread like a confession. Every page smelled faintly of her perfume, expensive, cautious, meant to hide something. But ink doesn't lie. Not when you know what to look for. The names were different this time, aliases stitched together from fragments of truth. Accounts opened in cities he'd never visited under identities that technically didn't exist. It wasn't carelessness. It was arrogance. The kind of arrogance that comes from thinking everyone else is blind. He had been moving money for years, not just from me, but from others too. Business partners, silent investors, even the charity fund he'd paraded in front of cameras. A thief disguised as a philanthropist. A fraud in tailored suits. I read through the statements line by line, tracing patterns, dates, signatures. His handwriting was careful, almost beautiful. I remembered how he used to sign birthday cards the same way, deliberate, rehearsed. Even his lies had good penmanship. The woman sat across from me, hands folded, eyes fixed on the table. He told me you'd never look deeper, she said quietly. That you'd be too proud to chase him. He mistook peace for surrender, I replied. A common mistake. Lightning flashed, washing the room in white. For a heartbeat, we both looked like ghosts, two people carved out of what he'd left behind. I've already sent copies to a contact overseas, she said. Someone who can verify everything. He can't hide what's coming. I nodded slowly. He's running out of shadows. She hesitated, voice soft. When this is over, what happens to him? I didn't answer immediately. I looked at the folder again, at the evidence heavy enough to break the spine of any reputation. He'll lose what he values most, I said. Not money, not freedom. Those can be replaced. Then what? Image, I said. He built his empire on perception. When that's gone, the rest will collapse on its own. Her expression shifted, part fear, part admiration. You're not what he said you were. No, I said. I never was. Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon. The kind of sound that doesn't just announce a storm, it declares one. I closed the folder, feeling its weight settle into certainty. The plan was no longer revenge, it was restoration. Not destruction for pleasure, but balance reclaimed. Thank you, I told her. You've done the hardest part, telling the truth. She stood, her relief fragile but real. What will you do now? I looked toward the sea, black and endless. I'll let the truth do what it always does, I said. Spread. The wind slammed the shutters once, then fell still, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Because by morning, his name would no longer open doors. It would close them. By dawn, the rain had stopped, leaving behind a sky the color of bruised steel. The world looked washed, stripped of its polish. Even the sea moved slower, as if waiting for the first ripple of consequence to reach it. It didn't take long. Truth travels faster than apology. The first headline appeared just after 7. Financial executive under investigation for fraudulent transfers. Then another. Charity funds misused, board launches internal audit. By 8:30, his name was everywhere. I watched it unfold from the same balcony where I'd once watched him leave. My phone lit up in short, frantic bursts, messages from people who had once ignored my calls. Reporters, former colleagues, even the ones who'd laughed that night in my living room. Everyone wanted a quote. Everyone wanted to stand next to the truth now that it had power again. I gave them none. Silence was my signature now. Down the coast, his house stood behind a line of cypress trees. From here I could just make out the shape of his balcony, the one he'd built to face mine, as if control required visibility. I wondered if he was standing there now, watching his empire bleed across the news cycle. He would deny it, of course. He'd make statements, hire lawyers, play victim to the same audience that once worshipped him. But denial doesn't stop a current. It only makes the drowning slower. At 9, the woman texted me. They froze his accounts. Then another message, moments later. He's gone. Gone. A simple word, heavy with possibilities. Gone where? Gone how? I read the messages again, slower this time. The letters blurred a little, not from fear, but from something quieter, the weight of finality. For all the planning, all the precision, I hadn't expected him to vanish so quickly. He was too proud to hide, too loud to disappear. Which meant only one thing: he was desperate. I went inside and poured coffee, the ritual steadying my hands. The cup trembled once, then stilled. The morning light spilled through the open window, hitting the empty frame on the wall, that silent outline where our photograph used to be. I picked it up, held it for a long time, and then set it face down. The reflection of my hand stayed on the glass, faint, but firm. Justice doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like absence. A message came through again, this time from a number I didn't recognize. No name. Just 3 words. You went too far. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. I set the cup down slowly. The phone buzzed again, another message, this one darker, more deliberate. He's not running. Outside, the horizon brightened, but the air felt colder. The kind of cold that doesn't come from weather. Somewhere out there, a man with nothing left to lose was making a decision. And whatever he chose to do next would bring the storm back to my door. The world didn't stop when he left, it simply exhaled. The wind eased. The sea softened. Even the house, once filled with noise and ghosts, seemed to breathe again. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. The news kept spinning, interviews, investigations, official statements. His face became a headline, then a scandal, then a cautionary tale. People who once praised him now spoke his name in past tense. Reputation, I learned, has no funeral. It just fades quietly until no one bothers to remember. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. Revenge isn't something you wear, it's something you outgrow. The woman sent one last message a week later. It's done. The board removed him. They're asking about you, if you'll return. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Some doors aren't meant to be reopened. Instead, I walked down to the shore that morning. The tide was low, the sand cold beneath my feet. I carried the folder, the one that had once held every piece of proof, every scar dressed as paper. I knelt and laid it on the sand. The wind caught its edges, pages lifting like wings. One by one, they scattered, into the surf, into the sky, into nowhere. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about freeing it. I stayed there until the horizon began to burn gold. The air smelled of salt and forgiveness. Somewhere beyond the water, he was still out there, not running, not winning, just existing inside the shell of his own making. And that was enough. Because in the end, justice wasn't the sound of his downfall. It was the sound of my silence, unbroken and whole. I walked back to the house, mine again, fully. I opened the door, sunlight spilling through the frame, touching every surface that had once been tainted by memory. On the wall, where our photograph had hung, I placed something new, a simple image of the sea, endless and untamed. I stood there for a while, listening. Not for him. Not for ghosts. Just for the quiet heartbeat of a life beginning again. Somewhere in that stillness, I heard it, not an apology, not regret. Just truth. Clean, sharp, and final. I smiled, faintly. The kind of smile that doesn't perform, that doesn't need to prove anything. Because after everything, I had learned the simplest, most expensive lesson of all. Sometimes silence is the loudest revenge.